Countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Blast off.
Well, I guess it is time, and welcome everyone to Ask an Astronaut, the first NASA education downlink ever done by a Canadian university. My name is Cameron Young, Arts and Science 18, and I'm the 35th Rector of Queen's University.
And my name is Alex De Silva, and I'm a Con Ed 19 student, and I'm the 36th Rector of Queen's University. And Cam and I are going to be your moderators for today's event. So before we officially get started, I'm just going to ask that everybody take a moment and notice the emergency exit closest to your seat, keeping in mind that exit may not be the entrance you originally came in through. The second thing I'm going to ask you to take a moment to do is just silence or turn off your cell phones, as we will be communicating live with the International Space Station, and we wouldn't want to interrupt or delay the event at all.
Now, on to the incredible lineup. You're going to be hearing from some of our fantastic researchers here at Queen's, and one of our amazing alumni who is visiting us all the way from Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas.
And then, when you thought it couldn't get any better, we have something absolutely out of this world for you.
That is one of the many puns that we have for you today that involves space.
We have our very own NASA astronaut, Dr. Drew Feustel, currently aboard the International Space Station on Mission 55. For the first time ever, a Queen's alum will be coming to us live from space and answer questions from the Queens and Kingston community. Speaking of which, do you know where this photo was taken?
Is that Kingston? How did you get that photo, Alex?
We know someone in space, and he may have taken this photo as the ISS was flying directly above Kingston.
Well, it's certainly nice to have friends in high places. Well, everyone, let's get on to our program today. We'd like to invite to this stage our principal and vice chancellor, who will offer greetings on behalf of the university. Please welcome Principal Daniel Wolf.
Well, thank you, Cam and Alex, for that stellar opening. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for joining us at this truly remarkable event. It's always great to have the community assembled here in Grant Hall, and we have many people, not just from the extended Queen's community, but from even beyond. And it seems fitting on this, the last day of classes for the 2017-18 academic year, that we're gathered for something of a master class where we'll hear from researchers doing incredible work related to space exploration that help us better understand the marvels of the universe. Now, we also have a good many special guests and speakers I'd like to welcome today, and I would just ask them to stand and be recognized as I call your name. First, Dr. Michelle Thompson, Art Sci 11, Sci 11 from NASA's Johnson Space Center, and her family who are joining us all the way from Houston. Dr. Arthur McDonald, Nobel Laureate and the Gordon and Patricia Gray Chair of Particle Astrophysics Emeritus. Dr. Nathalie Ouellette, MSc 12, PhD 16 from the Canadian Particle Astrophysics Research Centre. Dr. Nandini Deshpande from the School of Rehabilitation and Therapy. Mark Gerritsen, Member of Parliament for Kingston and the Islands. Dr. Herb Helmstedt, Professor Emeritus from the Department of Geological Sciences and Geological Engineering, who was Drew's mentor. We have also a delegation from the Canadian Space Agency. We have members of the Kingston branch of the Queen's University Alumni Association. And we have, let me talk about the music of the spheres, Rob Baker, BFA 86, from the Tragically Hip, who is a good friend of Drew's. And last but not least, and certainly most important to Drew himself, his wife, Indira Feustel, along with the contingent of Feustel family members. So welcome all, and thank you for being with us here today. Now, we're always proud of saying that Queen's has 155,000 alumni in 154 countries around the world doing extraordinary work, and one orbiting the Earth aboard the International Space Station at about 27,000 kilometers an hour. Normally, things at universities don't go quite that fast. We are very proud to call Dr. Feustel, Drew, one of our own. Drew came to Queen's in the early 1990s and completed a PhD in geological sciences in 1995, and he is still deeply connected to his alma mater and to the Kingston area, and we will gladly welcome him back for a visit upon his safe return to Earth a few months from now. Now, within 5 years of graduating from Queen's and after cold calling Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield at the Johnson Space Center, Drew was accepted into the NASA astronaut program, I'm told, on his first try. Now a flight engineer on Mission 55, Drew will actually become the commander of the station on Mission 56 in June, and I know he is proud to be only the second Canadian, following Commander Hadfield, to perform this role. So in a short while, we'll have, and my speech says, an out-of-this-world opportunity, but Cam's already made that joke, to speak with Drew live from, stop stealing my lines, with Drew live from the International Space Station. And as the Rector already said, we are the only Canadian university to have this chance. So I hope you enjoy the event, that you walk away from here inspired to look up at the stars and wonder about the beauty and mysteries of our universe. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for those remarks, Principal Wolf. At this point, I am over the moon to be able to welcome our Member of Parliament for Kingston and the Islands, MP Mark Gerritsen.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with you for this spectacular event, and it is even so much more rewarding to see so many young people in the audience, so many kids from schools that are here to participate in this. I know that one day I'll be able to look back at this and say, and hear a story about how one of these young kids were here, saw this, and became inspired to become an astronaut, and will be doing great things out of this world in the future. And to the kids that are in the audience, I promise you that I'm the most boring part of this entire presentation. So from after I'm done, it only gets better from this point. But it is a great opportunity to be here, and thank you to Queen's University for hosting the educational downlink with NASA today. This is such an incredible opportunity. I know we are all looking forward to hearing about the research and breakthroughs at Queen's. And of course, we are excited to be connecting with Queen's alumnus, Dr. Andrew Feustel, in space aboard the International Space Station. I want to talk to you today about the importance of fundamental research. And I know that this is a topic that will be received well in this audience. Research expands our basic understanding of the world, generates new ideas, leads to new jobs, and helps to build a robust workforce. And this doesn't just have economic benefits. It also makes Canada and the world a safer, healthier, better place to live. Fundamental research pushes the knowledge frontier to ultimately lay the foundation for new innovations that drive development. In 2017, the federal government received a report on Canada's Fundamental Science Review. It found that Canada spends more on higher education, research and development as a share of GDP than any other G7 country in the world, which is great news. However, the report also identified some action items. First, the necessity to shift how, when, and where Canada invests. We need to encourage collaboration, foster interdisciplinary research, and better support research that has the potential to be groundbreaking. And second, that we need to focus on the next generation of researchers, students, early career researchers, and the science community that is increasingly diversified. And to address these challenges, the 2018 federal budget has put forward historic investments to support the work of researchers at post-secondary institutions like here at Queen's. The government has chosen to invest $925 million over 5 years and $235 million per year ongoing. This investment specifically supports Canada's 3 granting councils: the Natural Science and Engineering Research Council, the Canadian Institute of Health Research, and the Social Science and Humanities Research Councils. And I know there are crafty acronyms for each of those that many of you in the room know. The government will also provide $275 million over 5 years and $65 million per year ongoing for the Tri-Council Fund to specifically support research that is international, interdisciplinary, and fast-breaking and higher risk. These investments will increase the Granting Council's annual budgets and fundamental research by over 25%. By 2021, the funding will provide increased support and training opportunities for about 21,000 researchers, students, and high-quality personnel across Canada. Canada's fundamental research system has led to breakthrough discoveries of artificial intelligence, regenerative medicine, astrophysics, hats off to you, Dr. McDonald, and many more fields. And ladies and gentlemen, what I have just talked about is very important to mention, even though I bombarded you with numbers. It is important because whereas other countries have chosen deregulation and austerity, Canada has taken a different path, a path of investment. Investment in our people and what we know they are capable of. Investment in the future and what Canada will have to offer the world. And we know that this is the right path because history has shown that this approach will produce a stronger and more prosperous country and society. We are on the brink of the largest investment in fundamental research in Canadian history. Through these investments, Canada's research system will be powered to continue to make the discoveries that will shape the future and deliver tangible benefits to Canadians. So I am very proud of the strong scientific community we have here at Queen's. Many of you are the leaders that are inspiring the next generation to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. You are inspiring tomorrow's scientists to make significant breakthroughs in the world and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you very much, MP Gerritsen. Our next speaker is one of the most accomplished people I have ever had the privilege of meeting. She also has one of the coolest titles, Planetary Scientist.
Dr. Michelle Thompson completed a dual degree in geological engineering and biology in 2011 right here at Queen's University. She also holds a master's and PhD in planetary science from the University of Arizona. She is currently a NASA postdoctoral fellow and was one of the top 32 finalists for the Canadian Space Agency Astronaut Recruitment Campaign in 2017. She will be starting as an assistant professor in the Department of Earth, Atmospheric, and Planetary Sciences at Purdue University this summer.
Please welcome to the stage Dr. Michelle Thompson.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the invitation to be here today. It's great to be back at Queen's. So the first day that I set foot on site at NASA Johnson Space Center, I was 20 years old. If I'm being a little more quantitative, which I've been known to do, I was 20 years old, 10 months, and 13 days. I remember exactly how old I was because I remember thinking to myself, wow, I'm 20 years old and my dreams have just come true. I was starting as a summer intern at Johnson Space Center in Building 31, which is the same building that holds NASA's collection of lunar samples that were brought back from the moon to the surface of the Earth. And that is where this guy comes in. This iconic picture is Buzz Aldrin. He was the second man to walk on the moon during the Apollo 11 mission after Neil Armstrong. The samples that I was going to be working on for my summer internship were picked up off the surface of the moon by this man. Now, my dreams of working on space dust hadn't been so clear to me. When I was finishing high school, I wasn't entirely sure where I wanted to go or what I wanted to study, but I ended up coming to Queens because of the passion and the energy that I felt in this community on campus. I started out in arts and science, and I was leaning towards biology when my sister recommended that I take a course in the geology department, and she likes to take a lot of credit for this, by the way. My sister recommended that, I took the course, I loved it, and I was hooked. Now, switching into geology is what led me to NASA. Early in my second year, Dr. Ron Peterson, the professor from my mineralogy class, gave a guest lecture on some work he'd been doing on minerals on Mars. After that class, I approached him and I said, I want to do that. And he just said, okay. He took me to a conference for Canadian planetary scientists. Then he set up a summer research internship for me with some of his colleagues at the Royal Ontario Museum working on a meteorite. And he wrote me a letter of recommendation for my summer internship at NASA. Now that brings me back to this guy. The summer I worked at NASA, I started out working on very fine-grained dust particles from the Apollo 11 mission. I was studying a process known as space weathering, and that's something that I'm still working on today. Now, space weathering occurs on the surfaces of airless planetary bodies. That means they don't have an atmosphere and they don't have a magnetic field. While here on Earth, we do have that atmosphere to protect us, these sorts of surfaces have things hurtling towards them all the time. They're continually bombarded with energetic particles from the solar wind and from fine-grained dust particles impacting the surface known as micrometeorites. Now, both of these processes change the chemical composition and they change the microstructure of material that's on those planetary surfaces. And these changes can be very small, down to the atomic scale, but they have big ramifications because changes in chemistry affect the optical properties of the material. And the optical properties are what we observe when we send spacecraft to these planetary bodies. So without understanding how space weathering operates, we can't reliably tell what the composition of planetary surfaces are. Now, the Apollo missions brought back material from the moon, and it was the first opportunity to really study space weathering and planetary materials. My research started out working on the moon, and I've since expanded to include dust particles from near-Earth asteroid Itokawa, and more recently I've started to prepare for 2 ongoing missions, Hayabusa 2 and OSIRIS-REx. And both of those missions are going to target extremely primitive, organic-rich asteroids. And so I perform experiments in the laboratory which simulate these space weathering processes in order to get ready for our arrival at the asteroids this summer and eventually for sample return. So my first summer at NASA was filled with some of the most magical experiences of my life. Here I was, this young woman from rural southern Ontario, and my dreams of working at NASA had just come true. The problem with realizing your dreams when you're very young, though, is that you have to start thinking of new ones. I started thinking, I'm really passionate about this. I love space exploration. Maybe I should try to go to space. Maybe I should try to be an astronaut. Now, that is a big dream, but I knew that there was heritage from Queens in the astronaut corps. Drew Feustel, who we're going to hear from in a few minutes, had gotten his PhD from the very department that I was studying in. So I knew that there was a chance. So I finished up my time at Queens, I went to graduate school, I finished my PhD in planetary science from the University of Arizona, and then I applied to be a postdoctoral fellow at NASA Johnson Space Center, which is where I am now. As I was finishing up my PhD, the moment to try and achieve that next big dream arrived. The Canadian Space Agency was recruiting astronauts. I was at home waiting for my new working visa, and I wrote my astronaut application from the deck of my parents' cottage on the northern Bruce Peninsula. I submitted the application and then I promptly forgot about it because I was moving, I was starting a new job, and I was going to NASA. Everything was going great. And then I found out that I had made the short list of the top 160 candidates. Almost 4,000 people had applied, and I found myself in the top 160. I was shocked. The next few months were a whirlwind of medical testing and trips back to Canada for intense and sometimes grueling evaluations. Here I was among the top 160, and all of the candidates were stressed to our physical, our mental, and our emotional limits. We were doing everything from being put in problem-solving situations to emergency response scenarios, escaping crashed helicopters and fighting fires and trying to save sinking ships. We did public relations exercises, and we did workout after workout after workout. And I made it through all of that exhaustion, from the top 160 to the top 100 to the top 72, and then down to the final 32. And then, as I was driving home from a conference, I got an email thanking me for my application, but telling me that I was not going to be selected to continue to the next round. I was 28 years old. Well, actually, I was 28 years, 7 months, and 4 days old. I remember exactly how old I was because I remember the feeling of my dreams not coming true. Of course, I had people telling me that making it to the top 32 was an accomplishment in itself, and deep down I knew that, and I know that now, but at the time, it did not feel like that. It felt very much like failure. I didn't have any time to dwell, though, because the morning after I got that email, I got on a plane to go do a 3-day faculty interview for a position as an assistant professor at Purdue University, a position in the same department where Drew Feustel had done his bachelor's and his master's degrees. So I felt like that was a good sign. I got that job, and I'll be starting in the fall, and in a funny twist of fate, the way that life can be sometimes, Purdue has produced more astronauts than almost any other US institution. So for the next little while, I'm happy to be training some future space women and space men rather than just being one myself. The day that I leave NASA, I will be 30 years old. Well, I'll be 30 years and 3 days. This decade of my life has NASA bookends at either side. I was at NASA when my dreams came true, and I was there when I fell short of achieving others. That being said, my time at NASA and my time at Queen's before that has given me opportunities that I had never thought possible. I'm looking forward to the next decade and moving onwards and upwards always. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thompson. Now that we've heard from a planetary scientist, let's keep going with this theme of incredible researchers.
Okay, Alex, how about an astrophysicist?
I think we have a couple of those here at Queen's.
Oh, yes, we do. But let's hear from one of the most famous astrophysicists in the world. He is the co-winner of the 2015 Nobel Prize in Physics, Professor Emeritus in Department of Physics, Engineering Physics, and Astronomy, and the Gordon and Patricia Gray Chair in Particle Physics, Astrophysics, Emeritus. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Arthur B. McDonald.
Well, it's really a pleasure to be here, and this is going to be fun to have this opportunity to interact with Dr. Feustel directly. What I want to talk about today is the fact that when we go to unusual locations or choose our scenarios for doing research, we can often do things that are just completely different than anyone else can do, things that would be impossible to do elsewhere. That's very true for the experiments that are being done on the space station, and it's very true also for the experiments that are done 2 kilometers underground at our lab near Sudbury called Snow Lab. If you go underground 2 kilometers, you use the rock above you to shield out the cosmic rays that otherwise would interfere with your measurements, and you can do very exotic measurements with a very low radioactivity background. In the case of the space station, you're actually up where the primary cosmic rays are. You're above the atmosphere. And when you make measurements, you are measuring the cosmic rays themselves. But in addition to that, you can look for evidence, particularly with a spectrometer, a magnetic spectrometer so-called, the alpha magnetic spectrometer, which Dr. Feustel actually was involved in installing on one of his previous missions. And with that spectrometer, you can look for evidence for dark matter, which is now a major question in terms of identifying its properties. It's a major question at SNOLAB, where we look for the dark matter particles that have penetrated through that 2 kilometers of rock and interacted with our detectors. The other thing that is done with the space station, or really with an instrument in which the space station or the missions that Dr. Feustel was involved in terms of understanding our universe more completely, is the Hubble Space Telescope, where on one of his previous missions, he was involved in the repairs to that particular instrument. And that instrument can be used to look for the evidence of galaxies at the farthest reaches of our universe. In other words, as far back in time as you can go, because with the expansion of the universe, they are fainter than other things that you might observe with telescopes that are obscured by the atmosphere. And so in the next couple of slides, let me just try to put this in context. Right now, we think that the universe is composed of about 4% us. In other words, the matter from which we are made is only about 4% of the total. About 26% of that is what we refer to as dark matter. Neutrinos are a very small part of that. Dark matter particles are thought to be very seldom interacting, as neutrinos are, but much more massive than neutrinos. And then there's about 70% of the universe is referred to as dark energy. Really, the measurements that were made were observations of supernova that are in the farthest distant places of the universe, in some cases in galaxies identified by the Hubble Space Telescope. It was found when people studied those that there was evidence that the universe is actually accelerating in its expansion since the Big Bang. Changes to Einstein's original ideas of how gravity affects things, and the Hubble was a significant part of that. The AMS will be studying the dark matter particles in a different way from what we are, but nevertheless, the same objective of trying to understand these dark matter particles. We have this laboratory 2 kilometers underground at Sudbury, which, building upon the work that was done at the SNO experiment, Sudbury Neutrino Observatory, on the left of the figure, we are now using the expanded area to study 3 other experiments in which Queen's researchers are very actively involved, studying dark matter. And the ultra-clean environment, which keeps mine dust out of everything and reduces even tiny amounts of radioactivity, combined with the great depth, and therefore the use of the rock in reducing the background from outer space of cosmic rays, prevents our detectors, in the case of the cosmic rays, from glowing essentially like the northern lights. That's the same phenomenon that we're dealing with, and we're looking for events in a couple of years, perhaps one event in a couple of years. If you had it glowing like the northern lights, you couldn't conceivably do that. But we reduce cosmic radiation by factors of something like 10 million in terms of its interactions in our detectors. The experiments that are being done, 2 of them, that involve Queen's researchers, the one on the left is called DEEP. It's 3,600 kilograms of liquid argon, in other words, about minus 200 degrees Celsius, in which we're looking for faint bursts of light, and the properties of argon enable us to tell the difference between dark matter and local radioactivity. In the middle, you see what's on the space station. It's the alpha magnetic spectrometer. They are attempting to observe positrons, antimatter particles to electrons, which might be produced by certain forms of dark matter coming together in certain parts of our universe and emitting electrons and positrons in equal numbers. The positrons are the unusual particles, and so the objective there is to look for dark matter. They're also looking for limits on antimatter. They're looking for unusual antimatter particles, anti-helium, which wouldn't be produced in the Big Bang, might be produced subsequent to that in the process of there being significant amounts of antimatter. they have already limited the amount of anti-helium to only a part in a million, and they're working further with the measurements that are ongoing. And finally, on the right is a very unusual experiment. It's called PICO. It's actually led in Canada by Tony Noble, who is the director of the Canadian Particle Astrophysics Research Centre here, and Nathalie is going to speak about that a bit in our next talk. It's an experiment that is very interesting. It turns out dark matter will form bubbles in certain types of fluids that can be superheated, as we call it. It's a situation where the dark matter particles can produce bubbles, but the majority of the radiation cannot. And so they have large containers of materials put into this superheated form, and they look for the formation of bubbles and track them very carefully. So who would have thought that those bubble wands could inspire scientists to do something really significant? And so if the younger students want to make a transition from bubble wands to real hard science, here's an area they could get into. So it really is a pleasure to see so many of the younger people here. I'm going to be very interested to hear their questions to Dr. Feustel later on. And I'm interested myself in speaking to him because I think he was involved in the installation of systems for measuring seismic effects very close to our detector, which were very important for us in attempting to be sure that we were going to have stability when we built an enormous cavity for the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory in the first place. So there's a Queen's connection and a scientific connection between what we do now and what he is working on. And there was back in the early 1990s as well when he was a student here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. McDonald. Now, astrophysics is a pretty big deal here at Queen's.
Not only do we have the Queen's Observatory, which is a great place to catch a glimpse of the ISS, by the way, but we also have the Canadian Particle Astrophysics Research Centre, a national astroparticle physics research network. Dr. Nathalie Ouellette completed her PhD here at Queen's in 2016 and now works for the Canadian Particle Astrophysics Research Centre. Please welcome Dr. Nathalie Ouellette.
Hi, I'd just like to start off by thanking Queen's University and the whole organizing team for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk to you today. So what I'm hoping to share today is some of what I've learned over time about the best ways that science and modern astronomy work. So I knew I wanted to be an astronomer since I was a little girl, and I think a lot of us in this field, it's a similar story. And like most people growing up, I had a certain image of what a scientist or a physicist or an astronomer looked like. And maybe you had one too growing up. So it was usually one person, maybe a man, for sure wearing a white lab coat, maybe like holding beakers or something like that, standing alone in a room, maybe in front of a chalkboard or a telescope, waiting for that eureka moment. But that image of a scientist has never been as inaccurate as it is right now. Science isn't about lone people working individually trying to solve problems. It's a very collaborative process. And I'll talk a little bit about that today. So here you have an image in the center. It's a composite of a galaxy, which is the type of object that I study in space. And you have around it images that were taken at different wavelengths. And I'll explain a little bit about that too. And in order to get the center image, to get the full picture of the galaxy that contains stars and gas and dust and even dark matter, which you can't really see in this picture because it's invisible in the electromagnetic spectrum, you need to look at all the different components. And in order to look at all the different components, you have to use different tools, and you need teams of people using these different tools to build the center image. So the universe is telling us a really complex story, and modern astronomy needs to have these cosmic collaborations that work together to solve these problems. So talking a little bit about the electromagnetic spectrum, I'd say it's fair to say that for the most part, humans have been looking up at the sky and looking at the light that we see from the stars. So the electromagnetic spectrum is all of those different types of light. So we know visible light really well because this is what we use to see around us. But we have everything from the very energetic gamma and X-rays and ultraviolet through to the visible and infrared, all the way to the long radio wavelengths, which we use in our telecommunications. But really, it's a bit of an evolutionary quirk that we're so familiar with visible light, and that's what we use to see. So the real reason we think why humans see in what we call now visible light or optical light is because our star, the sun, shines brightest at that wavelength. So through evolutionary processes, our eyes have adapted to utilize that brightest peak in the sun's spectrum. But the universe doesn't just stick to that visible spectrum. It emits signals in all different wavelengths, from the gamma rays to the radio waves. And as I've started my role at the Canadian Particle Astrophysics Research Centre, I've had the benefit of continuing my learning and acquiring knowledge, and I've been learning about all of these particles that are emitted by objects in space as well, like neutrinos that are emitted from the sun. And we have to devise special techniques that are outside the realm of normal astronomy to try to detect these signals, because these signals, these particles, are also part of the story that the universe is trying to tell us. And if you look even more recently than that, in the last few years, we've started to be able to detect warps in the very fabric of space-time that we call gravitational waves that are due to collisions between really extreme objects like black holes and neutron stars, and they create these waves in space-time that we can now detect thanks to collaborations like the LIGO collaboration, who won the Nobel Prize last year in physics for detecting these gravitational waves. Putting all of this together is something we called multi-messenger astronomy. We can take all of these different signals and we can piece together the story that the universe is trying to tell us. So this is a really impressive task that we have to deal with, and it's made even harder by the fact that the vantage point that you have to study these different signals aren't all created equal. So here you have a figure that shows how opaque or transparent our atmosphere is to different parts of the electromagnetic wave spectrum. And it's fair to say that I think humans, for the most part, are stuck here on Earth with the atmosphere above us. Some are not, as we know, like Drew Feustel is able to go out into space, but for the most part, we have to contend with the atmosphere here. So you can see in this plot that we can't see anything in the gamma or X-rays, most of the UV light, and that's a good thing because those radiations are actually very, very harmful and dangerous to us. So the fact that the atmosphere is protecting us is good for life, but not as good for astronomy. You see that the visible and the radio wavelengths is where we get the most light coming through the atmosphere, which is another reason why we use visible light to see around us, and why we've developed telecommunications around the fact that radio waves are accessible through our atmosphere. But because we're blocked by certain areas here, that means that we need to change our vantage point in order to get the full story in our universe. So this is where the leaps and bounds in our technology have really become useful. So on top of building our observatories on the surface of the Earth in really interesting extreme places like in Mauna Kea or in the Atacama Plateau in Chile, we've been able to launch satellites and space telescopes to try and probe the wavelengths that we're not able to see. So the gamma rays, the X-rays, the UV rays, and some of the infrared as well. Even for the visible wavelengths, though, it's useful for us to have space telescopes that can see in the visible range because there's no replacement for the space environment. We don't have to deal with light pollution. We don't have to deal with something called atmospheric seeing, which is blurring of the images. So space telescopes like the Hubble Space Telescope in the visible range have still been very, very useful for us in astronomy. We've also been able to send up rovers and probes to explore the reaches of our solar system and actually land on planets to collect samples, bring them back to Michelle so that she can analyze them, and we can understand a little bit more about what's going on in our solar system. Sometimes there's no replacement for the human touch, though, which is why having a stronghold like the International Space Station is such an invaluable asset to space science. And it's also valuable for other sciences because we can't recreate that microgravity environment anywhere here on Earth as well as it is at the ISS or in low Earth orbit. And this is why you end up having very diverse groups of people that can connect to space science through biology or medical sciences, through things like the ISS. And since the year 2000, we've had humans continuously in space because of the ISS. So we've never been as close as we are now to understanding all the messages we're getting from the universe. So what does it matter if we don't see everything that's going on in the universe? So here we have a picture of a spiral galaxy, the Whirlpool galaxy, and it's seen in a few different wavelengths. So you have on the very left the radio waves that are emitted by the cold gas. As you go to warmer and warmer or higher and higher energy wavelengths, you start to see different temperatures of stars, and then you get to the very hot X-rays, which are emitted by the hot gas. So all of these different components play a special role in the process of galaxy evolution. But if you only study one wavelength, it's like studying a single piece in a puzzle that's many, many pieces large. That means that you're only getting a single part of the story. Now imagine instead of looking at a galaxy, you're instead building the team of scientists that wants to study these objects, build the telescopes, or make the computer algorithms that need to deal with all this data. If you're only building the team from the same kind of scientists, only engineers, only physicists, only computer scientists, you're only getting that one viewpoint. So the important thing when you're building these teams is to have scientists from all different types of fields that can combine their strengths together. So I think we're getting really, really close to a multidisciplinary approach to space science, which means that we'll finally be able to get the full picture from the universe, and I think we all have a role to play in that journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ouellette. Hey, Alex, Feustel fact for you. Drew is going to spend about 6 months in space, and he will actually be in command of the ISS for 3 of them.
Half a year in space. I wonder what that does to the human body.
That is a great question, Alex, and luckily, we have the perfect person to help answer that. Our next speaker is not only an associate professor with the School of Rehabilitation and Therapy here at Queen's, but she was also a research scholar at NASA's Johnson Space Center in 2016, researching the effects of spaceflight on the cardiovascular system. To tell us more, please welcome Dr. Nandini Deshpande.
Thank you very much. My connection with NASA began several years ago, actually. And that was because of my interest in neuroscience. So I'm not going to talk about astrophysics or geology or anything like that. My specific interest in research is about postural control. So how we maintain our balance, how we align our body segments for maintaining balance, with a specific interest in how we use our sensory information for postural control, and how things change with aging. So just to give you a brief idea, we have 3 sensory systems that we use for postural control. The vision, the vestibular system, which is inner ear balance system, and also information coming from the skin, muscles, tendons, etc. Now the brain very, very precisely puts these 3 inputs together for maintaining our posture. When astronauts spend extended time in zero gravity environment, and we see them all floating and doing their own things and doing research, at that time, 2 out of these 3 systems start deteriorating, and particularly the vestibular system. They start depending more and more on their vision. In short, the sensory interactions that are required for postural control start deteriorating as well as changing. And my doctoral work, my doctoral thesis research, was about sensory interactions during goal-directed locomotion in young and older individuals. So because of the sensory interaction part and because of the locomotion part, my supervisor just thought that, oh, let's have a neuroscientist from NASA as your external examiner. Wow, that was very stressful, but also it was very interesting and exciting. So Dr. Bloomberg, the senior research scientist in neurosciences, actually accepted our invitation. He not only came, but he also offered me a postdoctoral fellowship at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, NASA. So I went there, I gave the presentation of my thesis research, etc. But at the same time, I also received a postdoctoral fellowship from National Institutes of Health, which is just as big a deal. After a lot of deliberation, I went to the NIH and not to NASA and continued my research on aging. However, because of my particular interest in the vestibular system, I continued my collaboration with Johnson Space Center. And I then focused on the second task of the vestibular system, that is the control of the eye movements. Now, first of all, why the vestibular system? The vestibular system, the inner ear balance system, uses gravity as its reference point for calibrating body movements. So when astronauts spend this extended time in zero gravity environment, the system starts degrading and the function also starts declining. So going back to the eye movement control. Say, for example, this particular part of the vestibular system, vestibulo-ocular reflex, is used for controlling eye movements and for maintaining what is called as dynamic visual acuity. We all know visual acuity. We go to the ophthalmologist's office or optometrist's office, we sit in the chair, they measure our visual acuity, we know all that. Dynamic visual acuity is the ability to have visual acuity or have clear vision when you're walking things or when you're doing things when your head is moving. So when you're walking, for example, your head is bobbing up and down. If nothing is done, you will have blurred vision because your eyes are also moving with your head. So the vestibular system detects the head movements and asks the eye muscles to have compensatory actions so that you can have clear images even when your head is moving. At that time, NASA had developed a software, an overall protocol, software and hardware for measuring dynamic visual acuity in returning astronauts. And thankfully, they loaned me that protocol for conducting 2 of my studies here at Queen's. After that, I was interested in the third task of the vestibular system, that is the control of the cardiovascular responses. By that time, it was time for me to have my sabbatical, and the neuroscience group at the Johnson Space Center invited me as a research scholar for conducting on-site research using astronauts' data. So very, very briefly, when you're standing up from a chair or when you're sitting up from a lying position, what you experience is called as orthostatic challenge. In short, your blood pressure drops suddenly and your heart rate has to increase to compensate for that. Now, where is the vestibular system in all this? It is located within your head. So it very, very quickly detects the movement of the head and the direction of the head movement and then tells the brain, which is particularly the sympathetic system, to have compensatory responses even before the cardiovascular system can detect the drop in the blood pressure. Now, needless to say, the ability to counteract orthostatic challenges are significantly affected in returning astronauts. And so it has been already shown that when an astronaut is in the supine position and is taken passively to almost vertical position, there is significant decline in the responses of the cardiovascular system. However, there is a caveat here. When astronauts return to gravity environment, they have to perform several operational tasks actively. And when you are performing a movement actively, your muscles are contracting, so they are providing that pumping effect for the blood. Also, your body is operationally more ready for performing the task when you are doing the movement actively, as opposed to when you are moved passively. And therefore, it is really important to understand these responses when the person is performing some operationally important task or relevant task. And therefore, my research at the Johnson Space Center was about understanding the vestibular system impact and its relationship to the cardiovascular system. This research is almost completed and it's ready for publication. And this is my ongoing work with that group, and we are trying to understand what is the best possible way to predict deterioration in their cardiovascular responses as well as in their vestibular system-related postural responses before they actually go in the space, and so we can be ready for an individual astronaut to handle these things more competitively. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Deshpande. Well, everyone, the time for the NASA Education Downlink is quickly approaching, and your trusty moderators have all the details you need to know.
We are about to have a live feed video chat with Dr. Feustel, who is currently aboard the International Space Station. In March, we asked the Queen's community to submit questions that they would like to ask Drew live today. We received over 150 questions. It was out of this world. And some awesome space enthusiasts were selected to ask questions today.
The downlink will last for approximately 20 minutes. To start the downlink, we have a special surprise for Drew. After that, our participants will ask their questions one at a time until the time for the downlink runs out. Since time is limited and we do have lots of questions to get through, we'll just ask that you hold your applause until the end of the downlink so that we can try to get to everybody.
Once the downlink begins, we will see a live video feed of the International Space Station and Drew right here on the screen. We will have that view for the entire downlink. There is a slight delay of sound, as we are told this is pretty normal when you're communicating with someone in space.
If there is, in the rare circumstances, a cut to the video feed, we will have a backup audio feed from the International Space Station. So if that does occur, stay calm, we will still be able to communicate with Drew.
Since Drew will be aboard the ISS, he will be in zero gravity environment and will literally be floating while speaking to us. So keep an eye out for him anchoring himself by looping his feet through the rings in the floor or grabbing onto the nets along the wall.
Hey Cam, final Feustel fact for you. Did you know that when Drew got his PhD, it was in geological sciences?
Wait. So you're saying that Drew started on the rocks. So does that make him a rock star? That was good.
Cam was incredibly excited to deliver that specific joke.
Yes, I was. Well, Alex, we also wanted to mention that we have some folks from the grad studies who can tell you more about the grad programs offered here at Queen's, including Drew's. So you can always chat with them after the downlink if you are interested.
Well, I think that's all the Drew facts we have for now. Let's get some more from the man himself. It's time for the downlink. To kick it off, Cam and I are going to move the microphone into the aisle and conduct the downlink from the audience.
Everyone stand by, and we will be starting in a few seconds. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Cool. Nope, but I'm sure we can just wing it.
I can point them out to you.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so there's something
Yes, give us a signal when you want to start.
Yeah.
And then if you run out, just be like, all right, we're going to hang on. We're just going to get that feed. And then
Okay.
all right, good luck.
Cool.
Do you want to go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2?
Sounds good. Okay, everyone. Just get everyone's attention again. So we're going to officially begin the downlink at 12:05. In the meantime, we do have a number of other fun facts about Drew that we'll share with you as we wait for that to begin.
Right, so for the first interesting Drew fact, so Andrew is his full name. J. Feustel was born in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and grew up in Lake Orion, Michigan.
Drew attended Purdue University for his bachelor's and master's degree, studying solid earth sciences and geophysics, respectively.
Drew moved to Kingston, Ontario with his wife, Indra, to attend Queen's and earned his PhD at Queen's in geological sciences, specializing seismology in 1995.
Indra is originally from Cornwall, Ontario, and works as a speech-language pathologist. Their family often visits Ontario and is still closely connected to the area through friends and family.
Together, they have 2 children, Ari and Aiden, both born here in Kingston.
While in Kingston, Drew worked as a geophysicist for the engineering seismology group.
A TV documentary in the 90s on Canadian astronauts, including Julie Payette and Chris Hadfield, inspired Drew to pursue his childhood dreams of becoming an astronaut.
Drew and his family moved to Houston, Texas in 1997 to work at ExxonMobil in the seismology field before applying for NASA.
After cold calling NASA, Drew joined NASA in 2000 after successfully applying on his first try to the astronaut program.
Drew is a musician and enjoys playing guitar. When he's not training for his next mission, he performs lead vocals and lead guitar for Max Q, a Houston-based all-astronaut rock band.
I wonder if they rock hard. That's another one. Some of his other interests include auto restoration, car and motorcycle racing, tennis and water, and snow skiing.
Drew gained his Canadian citizenship, making him the most recent Canadian in space.
Do we keep going? Okay. Yeah? Okay. So another one, in preparation for his third mission with Expedition 5556 to the International Space Station, Dr. Feustel did extensive training in the gigantic swimming pool at NASA's Neutral Buoyancy Lab in Texas. Wearing his spacesuit underwater, he practiced the tasks he would need to perform at the ISS. Working underwater simulates the weightless environment of space. For every hour of an extravehicular activity planned for their mission, astronauts must train for up to 10 hours underwater.
In 2015, Drew returned to Queen's to receive the Queen's University Alumni Association's Alumni Achievement Award.
In 2017, Drew returned again to Queen's to receive his honorary doctorate.
Expedition 55 marked Drew's third trip to space. His previous missions include STS-125, a spaceflight in May of 2009 to repair the Hubble Space Telescope, and STS-134, a spaceflight in May 2011 to deliver equipment to the ISS.
Before his current mission, Drew logged more than 29 days in space with over 42 hours in spacewalks.
Drew added 6 more hours to his spacewalk total last week when he performed a spacewalk with Ricky Arnold, a fellow astronaut on the ISS, to repair and replace parts on the ISS.
That's a really cool name. During his current mission on the ISS, Drew will conduct hundreds of experiments as the hands, eyes, and ears of Earth-based scientists. He'll collect data on experiments that include studying thunder and lightning and their effects on Earth's climate, studying materials, coatings, and components in the harsh environment of space, testing microgravity's impact on bone marrow, and simulating gravity aboard the ISS on samples of fruit flies, flatworms, plants, fish, cells, and protein crystals.
All right, now, just before we officially get started, we're just going to pull up a tracking image of exactly where the IS is right now. So you can see where Drew is, you can see where he'll be coming to us live from, and then, yeah, we'll get started in just a few short minutes.
That's kind of nerve-wracking.
Yeah, rapid fire fun. We're here. Yeah. 3 minutes. I'll be holding the mic. Say it like the volume. It's up to you if you want to do your hand at the beginning again, but definitely the question.
Remember,
Deep breaths. You're going to do the right
I can get the moderator set.
We're not just gonna go
No, if anything, you're the coolest person in your class right now.
True.
I would be very jealous if I was in your class. I never did anything this cool until elementary school. Yep. Yep, totally up to you. Whatever you want.
They're all locked way up here.
Oh, for the final 2 questions, do you want to do
Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
I am ready for the event.
and what was the first thing you did?
Queen's University, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is Queen's University. How do you hear us?
Hello, Queen's University and everybody in Kingston. I've got you loud and clear.
Hi, Drew. We are so excited to be talking to you today, and welcome back virtually to Queen's University.
Well, thanks everybody for showing up today and joining in this event. I'm really excited to talk to you all, and I hope that you've had a good experience so far today.
Absolutely. Well, to get things started, we have a special guest that you may know. She traveled all the way from Houston and to be here to say hello. It's your wife, Indra.
Hi, sweetheart.
Hello, honey. It's nice to hear your voice.
It is such an incredible honor to be back here at Queen's University in Kingston. Drew, Ari, Aiden, and I we so feel the love and are so grateful for all of the tremendous support and well wishes. Thank you, Queens. Thank you, Canada. And speaking of Canada, Drew, I have the immense pleasure of introducing a very special greeting from our Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Justin P.J. Trudeau.
Dr. Feustel,
thank you.
Drew, congratulations on this incredible milestone and best of luck on ISS Expedition 56. Over the years, your many achievements have inspired a generation and encouraged young scientists around the world. You've shown us the power of hard work and tenacity and taught us that the sky isn't quite the limit. Thanks for making the whole Queen's community proud. All the best during your mission. Congratulations again. Je vous souhaite le meilleur des succès pour cette mission. Félicitations encore.
That's fantastic.
Well, Drew, we have some excited members of the Queens and Kingston community ready to ask you questions. So let's get right to it. Here is the first question.
Our names are Gabe and Isaac, and we are in grades 2 and 6. Here's our question.
How long does it take to get to the ISS, and what is the view like?
Well, the answer to the second question is the view is amazing. It's absolutely breathtaking to see Earth from space. And our trip to space in the Soyuz launch vehicle took us nearly 2 days, about 50 hours to get here. But the reality is we can make it in about 3 hours if we really try.
Hi, Drew. My name is Graham, and I'm speaking on behalf of Sean, who is an undergraduate student at Queen's. His question is, knowing what you know now, what advice would you give to yourself as a university student?
Well, if myself were the same person, if myself were the same individual who wanted to be an astronaut, I would say follow your dreams and have that idea in your mind to study hard and do your best and try to find a job that you love, because that'll make you the best at it.
Hello, my name is Catherine. I am an undergraduate student at Queen's. My question is, I know that you go through a lot of extensive training before your missions, but was there anything that took you by surprise or anything you weren't prepared for once you got to space?
I think when I got back to space this time, what I wasn't prepared for was seeing the breathtaking views again. I had forgotten after these 7 years how beautiful Earth is from space, and at times now when I look out the window, especially at night, I feel like I'm visiting a distant planet, some foreign place that's maybe has alien life down below. It's really interesting, but at night the Earth with its glow looks particularly unique and beautiful.
Hello, my name is Dr. Jain. I'm Canada's Research Chair in Power Electronics. Here is my question. What energy storage technologies are used on the ISS that we can take advantage of to design energy solution for our remote communities in Canada?
That's a great technical question, and on the ISS, our primary energy source is solar energy. We have 4 very large solar arrays that generate power on the ISS and actually charge batteries for us. So we rely solely on that energy to keep us going. And in fact, if we have problems with pointing or directing our solar arrays at the sun, that can be detrimental to the space station. If that system ultimately fails, we would have to leave the ISS because we no longer have the ability to power the space station.
Hi, my name is Rylan. I am an undergraduate student at Queen's. My question is, what is your opinion on the colonization of Mars, and would you consider being one of the first to go?
That's a great question, and the way I've answered it before is I'd be happy to go to Mars if I knew it was a round trip. I'm not really interested in a one-way journey, but I think it's important that humans continue to reach out into the solar system, and Mars is a great place to start for colonization and allowing us, teaching us how to live and work in space.
Hi, my name is David. I'm in grade 8, and my question is, what should I study to become an astronaut?
Well, David, you should primarily focus on science, engineering, mathematics, and technology. Astronauts are specialists in many different fields. Many of us have engineering backgrounds, but we also have medical doctors, technical individuals, test pilots, all different backgrounds, mainly in science, technology, and engineering.
Hello, Drew. My name is Dolly. I'm an undergraduate student in Queens. My question is, everything you do in space makes a difference to the whole world. What does that mean to you?
Well, I think it's important, the work that we do, and because I believe that humans should learn to live and work off of planet Earth. Planet Earth is our only home right now, but it's really critical for us to not only learn to preserve Earth, but learn to live off of it. And it's not the work that I'm doing, it's the work of the thousands of people, the scientists, engineers, and support personnel on Earth that allow us to be here and work in space. So really the credit goes to them and the work that they do in allowing us the opportunity and the privilege to be here.
Hi, Drew. My name is Alexander, and I am an undergraduate student at Queens. Here's my question. What is the most exciting or important way that you have been able to apply your background as a geophysicist to your work with NASA in space or on the ground?
Yeah, that's a great question. And as I just mentioned, astronauts have a large and very varying backgrounds and experiences. Mine as a geophysicist can directly apply to the work that we do on the space station, but most of the activities that I've done related to being a geophysicist are related to planetary exploration in developing techniques and tools that we would use on rovers or surface exploration vehicles to study the subsurface structures of the Moon or Mars. So I have done some work in those fields for the space program. On the space station, really I'm the eyes, the ears, and the hands of scientists who send experiments up here, and our job is to keep the space station operating and keep those experiments functioning so that the researchers can get the data that they're looking for.
Hi, my name is Rory. I'm in grade 7, and my question is, if one of the ISS modules was damaged, causing an emergency situation, what would you do?
Hi, Rory. That's a great question. And in fact, emergencies are one of the things that we practice to respond to on a regular basis on Earth. And we have a Soyuz spacecraft, the same spaceship that we flew here from Russia on, that is waiting and ready for us at any time to enter into that vehicle and fly it home if we have a critical emergency in space. And we consider that in space there's three things that can cause us to have catastrophic failure and even loss of life, and that's a fire, a depressurization, or a toxic atmosphere. And so those are the three responses that we practice on a regular basis. Even while we're here on ISS, we have fire drills and depressurization drills and toxic atmosphere drills to prepare us so that we're always ready to enter into that spacecraft and return to home.
Our names are Carter and Haley, and we are in grade 5. Here's our question.
What happens when you get sick in space?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, we try not to get sick in space. In fact, we stay away from other people before we launch for about 2 weeks before we launch so that we don't carry any diseases with us up into space. And for the most part, people are healthy up here, but we do have people that are individuals and crew members that are trained in medical responses, and we have medical kits here with different drugs that we can use to treat illness. If somebody is really sick or has appendicitis or something requiring surgery, we would, of course, have to return to Earth in our spacecraft and seek medical attention back on Earth.
Do you mind if I go ahead and do the desiccant swap while I'm waiting on Drew to finish up in the lab to do the nano rack removal from the Melfi and install on the rack?
Good morning, Drew. My name is Andy. I'm an undergraduate student at Queens. I'm wondering about whether artificial intelligence is used on the ISS.
Andy, that's a good question. As of right now, no, we don't have any artificial intelligence devices up here on the International Space Station. We did have a piece of equipment we called Robonaut, which was a human-looking robot that we could control from Earth. And I believe there's a next generation of robot that's being developed at the Johnson Space Center that we may see up here eventually. But currently, at this time, we do not have any artificial intelligence computers up here with us.
Hey, Drew. Rob Baker, Queens alumnus. What experience at Queens, either inside or outside of the classroom, helped prepare you for your career as an astronaut?
Hi, Rob. Great to hear from you. That's a great question. And I thought about that a little bit. And I think what Queens did for me as I was studying and working on my PhD was it really taught me to be a critical thinker and to recognize the value of research and the application of research to real-world problems. And the work that I did in underground mines, the parameters that I studied were helpful for other data that we acquired and that is acquired regularly in those mining environments. So for me, just that critical thought process and that ability to work independently and develop a thesis and work through those problems was really what I gained from being at Queen's University.
My name is Tim. I'm in grade 9. Here is my question. Are there times when you play tag through the station?
You know, sometimes we do play tag through the station. We'd like to have fun up here, and my favorite thing is trying to see how far I can fly through the middle of the space station without bumping into a wall. And believe it or not, it's pretty hard to do because your initial trajectory is what determines your end point. And so if you don't get the liftoff just right, you're bound to hit something before you intend to.
My name is Amy. I'm a Queen's University graduate student. My question is, how can research on the ISS be used to overcome challenges of the world's changing population, such as an aging demographic?
That's a good question, and you may be familiar with some of the research that's done on astronauts. Some of the physical changes that we experience are similar to aging, particularly with the changes in our bones and bone density and also muscle atrophy. And so we work hard every day to try to counteract those influences, and that sort of research has been critical to studying geriatric patients back on Earth and has been very helpful in reducing some of the effects of aging on the human population.
Hi, I'm Professor Art McDonald, and I won the Nobel Prize in 2015 for the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory. Hi. You must be one of Canada's most vertically traveled Canadians, I think. The question I have is, tell us how working as a geophysicist a couple of kilometers beneath the Earth's surface compares with working as an astronaut 220 miles or 400 kilometers above the surface.
Well, Art, as you know, working in underground mines and mining environments is sort of unique to other workplaces, and although there are a lot of people that do it, I think it presents you with some very unique challenges. One is there's some risk to working underground, limited access to escape paths. Of course, the equipment that you take with you really needs to be planned out in advance before you depart so that you have everything you need when you're down there. And of course, underground, you spend a lot of time working in very confined spaces. And that's similar to what we do in space. The work that we do takes a lot of planning and pre-planning and pre-positioning of equipment. And there's quite a bit of risk here. We're very isolated and have limited opportunities for escape if we have an emergency. And of course, everywhere we work here is really what could be considered a confined space, especially the Soyuz spacecraft that I flew up here in.
My name is Ritha. I am in grade 9. Here's my question. What strengths or characteristics make a great astronaut?
Well, my observation over the last 18 years is that one of the best characteristics of an astronaut is interpersonal skills and interpersonal communication. We spend a lot of time working together under difficult environments, and it's critical for us to be able to get along with each other, to understand our own strengths and weaknesses, to understand how to be followers as well as leaders, and exchange those roles on a regular basis depending on what the situation calls for. So to me, having a technical background is, of course, very important, but in the end, you still need to have the ability to communicate and work with others with varying backgrounds and backgrounds that are different than yours and trying to solve common challenges that are presented to each of you.
Hi, my name is Yi Ge. I'm an undergraduate student at Queen's. Here's my question. Does having 16 sunrises and sunsets in one day affect your sense of time?
You know, it does when we first arrive, but I can tell you now that I'm totally oblivious to the fact that the sun goes up and down every 35 to 45 minutes. We work by our watches, and we work by a timeline that we have in the computer that keeps us moving throughout the day. And what I have found, though, is it's a good idea for me to go to bed when it's bedtime. So my last look out the window, it's always good if it's nighttime outside, and then I can head to my sleep quarters and go to sleep. But in general, really the sunrises and sunsets don't seem to have any effect on us after a few days of being here.
My name is Dr. Nicole Domnick, and I'm a researcher at Queen's University. My students wondered, extended periods in space can alter calcium metabolism and increase calcium excretion. What consequences does this have on muscles in space?
Thanks for that question. That's a really good question. And I looked at that and I thought to myself that maybe your students mistake the doctor in front of my name for a medical doctor as opposed to a rock doctor. So I can tell you I don't really know the answer to that, but I'll be happy to follow up with you later if I can find somebody that has that information.
Hello, our names are Sema and Jack, and we are in grade 5. Here's our question.
How do you sleep in space?
Well, any way we want, really. In terms of orientation, we can sleep up, down, sideways, backwards, bundled up in a ball, straightened out, with our back straight, whatever we want. But we have little sleep quarters that are about the size of a refrigerator that we climb into at night and close the door, and there's a little sleeping bag in there that we can climb into. But in fact, we could just float in there with the doors closed if we wanted to. The challenge is if when you bump into the wall at night, you might wake up.
My name is Michelle. I'm a NASA postdoctoral fellow and a planetary scientist. And my question is, how has your perspective of Earth and humanity's place in the universe changed after your time in space?
Hi, Michelle. It's great to meet you again. You know, that's a good question, and I think that's probably one of the greatest impacts that it's probably been the greatest impact to my life as to how my perspective of Earth has changed. What I've realized from being in space and seeing Earth from space over the last 18 years working as an astronaut is that there's only one home for us. There's only one planet. And when we look out into the night sky or even the daylight sky past Earth, we don't see anything out there. There's no nearby places to visit. I mean, Mars is close by and the moon is close by, but really we're all on our own. And I think if more human beings had the opportunity to see Earth from space and see how fragile our atmosphere is and how thin that shell is that protects us from space and realize that the Earth's just spinning around out here all by itself, I think we would be a different people. We would be a different world. And if folks could see that we don't see the borders from space, we only see one land where we can all live, I think it would change everybody. And that's what's changed me. And it's a little bit saddening to realize how we act down on the planet. But I know there are a lot of good people that are trying to do better. And I hope we continue to march down that path. And I hope that space flight and space exploration helps us to get there and helps the rest of the population of the world to realize that we're all in this together. We've only got one planet, and Earth is our own spaceship. It's the only home we've got.
My name is Paige, and I'm in grade 9. Here is my question. Why do we explore/learn about space if we haven't explored everything on Earth?
Well, because space is unique, and space gives us an opportunity to learn things that we can't learn on the Earth. In space, we can study the effects of cellular growth and changes, chemical changes in zero gravity, very similar to the way cells react inside our own body and in the blood in our bodies. So there are a lot of special, unique situations that we can create in zero gravity that we can't create on Earth. And these things are important for medical research, material science research, and also being in space gives us an opportunity to study Earth from space. So I can't say that we've seen everything we need to see on the planet. I understand when people wonder why we don't continue to do more on Earth before we spend money and time working in space, but space is a unique opportunity for us, and it's a great way for us to learn more about our own evolution and learn how to venture off into the future.
My name is Matthew. I am a Queen's University alumnus. Here is my question. I understand that the International Space Station uses a complex water recycling system and reclaims about 93% of the water used. Given how long you'll be on the ISS and how it uses water, how might you approach your own water use differently when you return home?
Well,
15 seconds to hand over.
Yeah, okay. I can tell you that one of the ways we reclaim our water is by reclaiming our urine, and I probably won't start doing that at home. But other than that, I do try when I'm at home to
So there was a scheduled break, and we will have our connection reestablished in just a minute. Yeah. So the call was actually scheduled for exactly 20 minutes, but Drew wanted to make sure we got through every single question, so he made a special request with NASA, which is why we're on pause right now, but we're reconnecting because Drew wanted to make sure we got through everyone. 20 seconds and we'll be live again. Yeah. So wholesome.
I know. I love how he's flipped upside down. Yeah.
We're back.
Are you back?
Yes, we read you loud and clear.
Okay. I understand that the International Space Station uses a complex water recycling system and reclaims about 93% of the water used. Given how long you'll be on the ISS and how it uses water, how might you approach your own water use differently when you return home?
Great question. I did answer that once for you, but I'll tell you again. On the ISS, one of the things we do to reclaim our water is that we recycle our urine, and we actually drink our urine after we clean it. So we actually clean it to be nice and clean, clean it to the point where it's drinkable. I probably won't do that at home. I have no plans of recycling my urine, but I do make efforts to reduce the amount of water that I use back home.
Okay, so this was a question that was submitted by a Queen's University community member by the name of Alan. So I've heard the space station has its own odor. Has any thought gone into using plants or other methods to remedy this?
It's true that ISS has its unique odor, and it's different in various parts of the space station. But no, we haven't incorporated any plants or vegetation to help with that or modify the odors that we have here. We do grow lettuce on the ISS. We're growing some right now. But in the future, I'm not sure if that's part of the plan to control or modify the odors that we have here. It's not so bad.
Drew, I'm asking this question on behalf of Maria, a Queen's University undergraduate student. What did you do as soon as you boarded the International Space Station?
Well, the first thing I did was I went to the bathroom because we were sort of, took us a while to get here, although we do have a toilet on the Soyuz. But the next thing we did was have a conference with our families, and I was fortunate to be able to speak with my lovely wife, Indra, who's there, my children, and my mother and father who were in Russia, to view the launch and actually view the docking when we arrived.
Well, Drew, those are all of the questions that we have prepared for you today. On behalf of the entire Queens, Kingston, and entire Canadian community, really, we'd just like to thank you so much for connecting with us today and wish you the very, very best on missions 55 and 56. We really hope we get to chat again when you're back on the ground.
Thank you all for coming out today. I want to make sure to mention that David St. Jacques is the next Canadian Space Agency Canadian astronaut who will be in space at the end of this year. So I hope that you all can continue on with this, with following space and space exploration and get ready for that great mission for David St. Jacques. And we're just happy to be here, and I'm proud of the support that Queens has shown me, and I'm proud of the education and time that I spent there. So thank you all for your efforts in making this happen. And I look forward to speaking to you all again very soon. Take care, everybody.
This is UCACR. That concludes the event.
Thank you to all the participants from Queen's University. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communication.
Okay, everyone, so that concludes our event today. Thank you so much for joining us.
And then on behalf of, we can't wait to see who else from the Queens community will end up in space. Please exit using the doors. On behalf of myself and as well as Alex, we just want to thank everyone who participated and all of those who organized. And thank you very much for attending.